Welcome back, GRD 121, to part 2 of our BF apple mug. We already did the BF, which is our butterflies, and now we're going to make an apple. And we're going to do an apple even with anchor points and things like that, but we're going to do it out of 2 circles right now. And we're going to use some of our tools. We're even going to use the intersection and the subtract. Subtract to take a bite out of the apple, and intersection to make the leaf, or at least one way to make a leaf. So we're going to go here and make a new page. There's a new page icon here, and it's blank. And, don't fret. Your butterflies are still here. So you could go on page 2, and I'm going to call it Apple right away because that's what I'm going to put on my Apple page. And I guess the zoom stays the same page to page when I go through them. So I'll stay zoomed like I am now, and I'm going to make 2 ovals. So, I'm going to make one first. So I'm going to start here with an ellipse, and I'll make it kind of egg-shaped, kind of like that. And the idea is we're going to rotate it so it has a little bit more of an apple shape. It won't be really great yet because it'll look kind of like a peach or a cherry in some ways. But I'm going to make like an egg shape, and it doesn't matter how big it is. Looks like it's around 3 inches, 4 by 3, something like that. And I'm going to rotate it. We know how to rotate it, so I'm going to rotate it on its center. I'm just going to rotate it out like that a little bit. So it's just kind of tipping over a little. And just so I know the angle, it's around 27 degrees. So if you don't tip it enough, it might not look as apple-ish. So it's around, this degree here. You could see you could even rotate this thing. So if you're like, I want to rotate it more, you can, but maybe 27, 28 degrees is probably fine. I wouldn't go any more than 30 degrees. But that looks fine. So that's rotated, and I'm going to make a copy and flip it. So I'm going to do Command D or Control D on Windows and make a copy, and there it is. And I'll just move it manually, and then I'll flip it around. Now you could change the rotation and make it like -30 or something, or you could just flip it and do that, and then it's perfect. I wouldn't have known to put in 149. I would have put like -30. And what I'm going to do here is just kind of move this in so it kind of looks like an apple as much as I can. Now, I may have rotated it too much now. Actually, now that I'm seeing it, the 30 might be too much, but we'll see how it goes. You could always go back. Actually, I'm going to go back a little bit. I think it's a little, if you look at it like that, looks too much like a heart. So probably that was too much. So I'm going to rotate this back a little bit, and I'm just doing it manually. So I'm just rotating it back. And you could go and copy and paste them again, but I guess that's okay. We'll just kind of move them together. So it'll look kind of like a cherry when you look at it. And if you have to line them up, you could highlight both of them and line them up and down. This is the up and down vertically, and I guess I had it pretty good. Obviously, if you line them on center, it's going to do that, which you don't want. So I'll do a Control Z or Command Z, and that's about right as far as how do I have them. And it looks like maybe somewhere around 20 degrees was probably a better degree than the 30 degrees. So when you start it, don't do it as much as me. But it doesn't have to be perfect because we're just going over some of the operations. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to just unite these. Remember using this thing, the compound path, we're just going to make a union. And now it looks like it's one shape, but remember there's still 2 there. And then use the squiggle or the convert to path. I'll call it the squiggle from here on out. And that'll make it into a complete path, and it's just one path over here. And we'll make it red to start. So it looks like an apple. You could certainly, put a gradient here and have it like dark red to lighter red to green to a highlight. There's all kinds of things you could do in here, and I will go over a little bit once we get the leaf on and take a bite out of it. Now, taking a bite out of it, that's easy. We're just going to take an oval or an ellipse and just draw it so it goes into it. Now, if you didn't draw it over top of it, you just move it around. We're going to overlay it wherever you want it. And if it's hard to see how much of a bite it's going to be, then just change the color. You can make it white, or it's close to white. You can make it gray, just so you can kind of picture the bite. So if you want a bigger bite, you could make it a bigger bite, like the apple bite is kind of like that, I guess. And just something like that is fine. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to highlight this shape and this one. So you could highlight through both shapes, the ellipse and the path. Now, if you didn't convert this to a path, it's going to say compound path over here, but we're going to do this, and we're going to do something called subtract. And it even has a little video on here, like a cookie cutter thing. Like you can watch that video. But basically the top shape is going to cookie cut or chop out of the bottom shape. So that top shape is going to take a bite out of the apple. But they all have to be selected. You can't just select this. you can't do this. Matter of fact, it's grayed out. It won't even let you do anything. So you have to select multiple shapes, and they should be overlapping too. So they should overlap each other. Although there may be times we do ones that are not overlapping, like with text and stuff. You know, like the letter I, if you want the dot and the stem to go together, you might make them a compound path. But anyway, we're going to subtract. So we're using subtract, and it took a bite out of it. Now the other one is still there. If you hover over it, it's still there. So to get rid of it, remember, let's just select the compound shape and just convert to paths, just to make it permanent. Now, this will mean you can't change your bite. Too bad. We're not worried about changing the bite. So it's just one path right now. And eventually we'll change, we'll work with anchor points and change things. You could even like put something here and unite it, or use the union and fill in that little area if you wanted, but we're not going to worry about being that perfect. Matter of fact, we're going to put a leaf there right now. And you can see it kind of looks like a cherry right now, but we're going to put a leaf on it. And instead of just making an oval leaf, because if we just go here with an ellipse and you make a leaf like that, that doesn't really look like a leaf. Let's move down a little so I can see it. If I make this green, and I have to go down to my fill here, and I'm going to make it green, and you could just check the regular lime green and then just make it a little darker, make it more like a primary green, like a green crayon. Now that doesn't look like a leaf. Now there's going to be things we can do to make it pointier, but what we could do now is we're going to use another operation called intersect, and we're going to take the intersection of two of these. So I'm just going to drag copy, and I could put it over there just so you see one and the other, and I'm going to put one over top of this. Now it might be hard to see what's going on, so I'm going to go to view, outline view, and I'm going to zoom in, and what I want is the intersection. Here's the intersection. This thing here, this little kind of, leaf shape. That's what we want. The football shape that's in the middle here with pointy ends. That's what we want to be our shape. So we're not going to cut one out. We're not going to join them together. We're going to get the intersection. So what's going to be left is the in-between area right here. So that's what we're going to do. And I could go back to just turn off outline view. Now sometimes it helps to make these a different color, but if you highlight them, you could kind of see the blue here, the blue lines, and that's what we're going to have. And we're going to go to intersect. Now if we did difference, that would do the opposite. So I'm going to squash it a little, and then I'm even going to convert it to path, because I don't need to undo it. And you could rotate a little bit so it looks like the Apple logo a little. That way it could go in the middle here and it doesn't look as bad. It looks a little more like an apple, I guess. That's not really that good. But what I will do on the apple at least is make a nicer gradient, because this looks like a cherry. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to click in the fill again. And remember, to use a gradient, you have to change it from color fill to radial gradient. Now it'll automatically make this red to black or whatever color it is. And I'm going to grab not the middle of this. Remember, this is kind of weird. If you start moving this around, although it may look okay, what I'd recommend is grabbing with the four-sided arrow and just kind of moving it up here right now. And what I'll do is I'll make this end, I'll click on this end here, I'll make that like a darker red. And you could just click on red and then click on a darker red and do something like that and get it real dark in the end, maybe something like that. And then even if you wanted to go and, I'm going to move this over and then click here, I'm going to put a highlight of like a yellow in there. And you could slide these around a little bit. And I guess you could maybe even get a little green in there maybe. Maybe I'll click here, click right on that thing and put a little green in there. Now that looks terrible. So I'll make it darker. Matter of fact, the whole thing looks terrible with the green in there. And we would have to move these things around. I think I'm going to leave the green out for now. And if you want to get it out, just drag down on it. Just pull down on it. I'll just leave it like that. I don't want to mess with this too much, because we'll do some other exercises with gradients. Now, obviously, you can adjust some of these things in here. You could move this like down a little bit. There's a lot of things you could do, although I think it's a little harder with the radial. And it's not real realistic at this point, but that doesn't look too bad. It looks somewhat like an apple. You could try a green apple or whatever. You can move this thing down so you see more red, but you can see it's getting, the closer you get these things together, the more of a harshness you get. So we'll do more with them. We'll experiment more with them. We'll do a thing with like a wine bottle and stuff like that, but that's probably good for now. On my leaf, the last thing I'll do with my leaf is just click on my leaf. I'll give that a gradient, and I'll click in the fill here. Actually, I'm not on my leaf. click on my leaf, click in my green here, and I'll give it just a linear gradient, and it's going green to black, and I could go to the black and just make it a green, and actually that looks okay, a light green, or I can make this the darker green and then go back and edit that one and make it a little lighter. And you can see if I zoom into here, it's kind of going across. You could make it kind of go down a little bit. So it's kind of following the shadow of the apple a little bit. Again, we're not trying to make this look super realistic. It's really hard to do that until we start working with the paths and things like that. So there's a linear gradient on here. There's a radial gradient here that has yellow, a lighter red, and a darker red. And that's our apple. So that's all we need to do for our apple right now. And again, we use the subtract to take a bite out of it, and we use intersect to create the leaf out of 2 ovals, and we made our apple out of 2 ovals. Eventually we'll work with anchor points and to make it more realistic in the future. So that's apple, that's part 2, and I'm gonna save it, and then I'm gonna make my 3rd page, which is gonna be the coffee mug. So let's save this, and it's syncing, make sure it syncs, and then we'll come back with part 3 for the coffee mug.